For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Sashnee Moodley. Researcher and analyst Professor Raymond Suttner joins me for Suttners View, a weekly commentary on South Africa's political scene. Welcome, Professor.
Morning.
The question of foreign-owned private security companies has again come into the spotlight in statements of the Minister of State Security. What is your view?
You know, this thing comes and goes. I think the first time it was raised was when Steve Tshwete was Minister of Police about 10 years ago. And in principle, I think it's completely correct in a democratic state that you watch very carefully about who, apart from the state security apparatus, who else has got a security capacity, especially foreign-owned firms, because it's a danger to a state to have foreign-owned companies performing functions that ought to be performed by the police service or the defense force of a particular country. Just by patrolling in a particular suburb, these private security companies are gathering intelligence. Now, they may not be going there to gather intelligence in a formal sense of the word. But if you do your job, you really need to be looking at, and you know they want the people who pay them, the residents, to think that they're doing their job. So they've got to look, okay, there's a hole in a fence here, or your gate has been left open, or this, that, and the other. And they have a good sense of the strengths and the vulnerabilities of an area. And they may be using this purely to enhance the reputation of their company and to have more and more people enroll with them rather than another company. But that same information that they gather can also be used to subvert a country's democratic system. For example, if in that area where they're living, a minister is living, they will probably know the person's movements. He leaves every morning at 6:30, comes back from this gate at this time. The gate of his house opens this way, and there's a pause of 30 seconds. And they can set up, they can provide, if someone wants to assassinate that person, they can provide the information that makes it possible to assassinate the person. You know, we know, for example, in our house, that the way you go in and the way you go out and seeing who is around your house when you get there are necessary things to look at, because someone can be waiting there to hijack you or shoot you or rob you. See, there's been hijackings outside houses. Taxis come there, they wait outside for someone. Meter taxis, they wait for someone, and while they're there, sometimes people have attacked the taxis or they've attacked the person. So in principle, there is this problem with private security, but in practice, the South African Police Service has not got the capacity to protect, provide the level of protection that people want or need to protect their homes from robberies and themselves from assault and so forth. Consequently, those people who can afford it, not those who need it, because everyone who needs it can't afford it, but the people who can afford it will get private security companies. And we may say this is a very bad thing, but the South African Police Service has not got the logistical and human capacity to deal with this. Incidentally, the private security industry, apparently there are 9,000 companies in South Africa. It's one of the biggest in the world, employing about 500,000 people. A few years ago, I read that they outgun the South African security services. And so it's a real danger. But the South African Police Service is not able to offer an equivalent service whereby your alarm goes off and then someone phones immediately, they send people and all that sort of thing. Not every firm is so efficient. So that is the problem, in that personally I would like to see private security outlawed. However, when you do that and community policing is not well developed and SAPS is not reliable, it creates a problem, and we can't really say they must go. Now, the most reliable firms, as far as I know, maybe they're not the biggest anymore, but Chubb, AGT at least are foreign owned. I don't think Stallion's been bought out by something called Seven Arrows. I don't know if it's foreign owned. But anyway, two of the biggest are definitely foreign owned companies, and none of them are all that reliable. But also there's the way private security operates is that if you go to a house and you spend 3 weeks and you haven't got a private security company, they organize a break-in into your house. And that's one way that they operate. Look, that's my thing. I think that it's not a desirable state of affairs, but we can't say to people don't do it. Those who can afford it, but there's a whole lot of people who can't.
But does the rise of the private security industry not entrench inequality, in that the poorer sections of the country cannot afford a private company?
Definitely, and in fact, if you go back to the apartheid period, I used to teach criminology, and I remember I did a study of the location of police stations, and most police stations were located in the white areas. And the people who suffer crime, not the people who moan most about crime, but the people who suffer crime most are black people. And they're in the townships, and there's not even safe areas for the children to play. There are all sorts of things that happen there because the policing is inadequate. Now, the police service may be well-intentioned in some cases, or many cases, but they don't have, you'll find they don't have enough transport, they don't have they don't have a tradition in South Africa of what they call the bobby on the beat in Britain, where the policeman walks down the street, everyone they're friendly, you can go to the policeman and say, how do I get to this, that and the other. Now the idea of going to ask a policeman for directions in South Africa is just very rare, because you try to stay away from the police because you fear violence. But also this thing of inequality, the fact that only the few very rich people in townships can afford private security, goes along with another number of other practices that disadvantage black people and the poor. The way the police and the private security operate, and the way residents tend to think, is that a person who is a criminal is likely to be black. Consequently, at roadblocks, the people that they stop are not me. I'm stopped once in a year or something like that. They're stopping black people all the time. You see them to the side there and all of that, or they're lying on the ground. I've never seen a white person lying on the ground being frisked. It just doesn't happen, because people have learnt from apartheid, and it's gone into their consciousness now, that criminal means black. And in my neighborhood, now I've been, either I've left or I've been expelled from these WhatsApp groups. But before I was kicked out, you'd get these things about 4 Bravo males, black males. Be careful for them. Now, we objected because we said, look, there are other ways of identifying, but also, you have in this country a lot of crazy people who might just open fire when they see 4 black people who are quite innocent human beings. I live in a gated community. That's one thing we've been expelled from. We don't agree with it. Now, when people come in there, black people are stopped, but white people just thank you. They salute to me, all these things, and but with the black people, what do you want? Do you live here? What address? This sort of thing, and also they've got these dogs and so forth. They leave me alone, but I'm married to an African woman and she doesn't have it so easy all of the time. So what I think we've got is a situation where the combination of things, also the private security, to get the residents, white residents or the newly empowered people, they live on a sort of panic, about their wealth being attacked. And the security companies encourage this. They keep on sending SMSs saying, have you got the latest panic button, 2017A, or something like this. And people are buying more and more gadgets, and they're going, this week we'll have training for domestic workers. And also they want to vet all the workers, take them to the police. Now, people who are coming from Zimbabwe and all of this, even if they've got their papers, they're not so keen on going into the police, because these police might just tear up their papers, which we know happens. So there's a whole lot of things there which happen, which I think are a big problem. And ideally, because of this inequality as well, we would need to get rid of them. But you don't have democratic alternatives yet. Yeah. Until we have strong democratic community policing forums, we are not going to be able to combat crime without private security. Now, in the 1980s, there were street committees in very many townships, and there were about 10 years ago, I don't know what the position is now, in Yeovil, there were street committees on a multiracial basis, which is very interesting. And people were trying their best to clean up Yeovil. And I think we really, if we are serious about building democracy, one of the ways of building democracy is not to rely on the state alone, also rely on yourself. Now, the state should be doing some things, but realistically, given the economic situation of South Africa, it's going to take a long time for the police service to be able to cover these things. But there are a lot of things that people could do as neighbours if they operated as communities. Now, a lot of these neighbours are not, they don't have a tradition of democratic organisation and just democratic consultation, all of that. But you need to build those sorts of things, which they were doing in Yeovil, because there it's a matter of life and death. Now, in more slightly better areas, more economically better areas, it's less dangerous, but I think it's needed there as well. But I think these people prefer to just buy their safety, what they think they're doing, but I'm not sure that they are.
Thanks for speaking with us, Professor. That was Professor Raymond Suttner speaking to Creamer Media's Polity about foreign-owned private security.